Frindle by Andrew Clements, the first chapter Friday read aloud video with the word nerd. Today, as you listen, play along. Watch for the story quote that will appear on screen. Write it down word by word and then follow the instructions given to you by your teacher. Make sure you stay all the way to the end to see if you've written it down correctly. Teachers, have you tried my student engagement worksheets? For each video, I have a novel-specific worksheet and many generic ones that can be used with any First Chapter Friday video. You can find these resources linked below and in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. Now, let's get to Chapter 1 of Frindle.
Hi, my name's Amanda Zieba. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd, and another First Chapter Friday video. This week, I'm going to be reading to you from the classic Frindle by Andrew Clements, and as a word nerd, this book has a special place in my heart, and I'll read you the back, and it will probably become very clear to you why I say that. Is Nick Allen a troublemaker? He really just likes to liven things up at school, and he's always had plenty of great ideas. When Nick learned some interesting information about how words are created, suddenly he's got the inspiration for his best plan ever, the Frindle. Who says a pen has to be called a pen? Why not call it a Frindle? Things begin innocently enough as Nick gets his friends to use the new word. Then other people in town start saying Frindle. Soon the school is in an uproar and Nick has become a local hero. His teacher wants Nick to put an end to all this nonsense, but the funny thing is, the Frindle doesn't belong to Nick anymore. The new word is spreading across the country, and there's nothing Nick can do to stop it. So, as a word nerd, making up a new word and getting all sorts of people to use it, that makes me really happy. But I was just thinking about how words and phrases and fads come and go, and things that like kids are saying. I went on a field trip a couple weeks ago with my fifth grader, and kids were saying this word, and I'm not even gonna say it because it's not naughty or anything, but like I'd probably say it wrong, and then y'all laugh at me. But um, and then my husband's like, "Yeah, I heard that one, but not as much as this one." And this one has totally died out since then. So, words, wordplay, things coming and going, all of that great stuff. I think there's going to be a lot for you guys to be able to relate to in this book. And so, it's won, like I just looked it up on Andrew's website, like 48 different awards. This book has been around since 1996, so since back when I was a freshman in high school, so a really long time. But I think it has stood the test of time and it is a great story. So that is why I'm sharing it with you this week. Let's dig into chapter 1 of Frindle by Andrew Clements. If you ask the kids and teachers at Lincoln Elementary School to make 3 lists, all the really bad kids, all the really smart kids, and all the really good kids, Nick Allen would not be on any of them. Nick deserved a list all of his own, and everyone knew it. Was Nick a troublemaker? Hard to say. One thing's for sure, Nick Allen had plenty of ideas, and he knew what to do with them. One time in 3rd grade, Nick decided to turn Miss Deaver's room into a tropical island. What kid in New Hampshire isn't ready for a little summer in February? So we got everyone to make small palm trees out of green and brown construction paper and taped them onto the corner of each desk. Miss Deaver only had been a teacher for about 6 months, and she was delighted. That's so cute. The next day, all the girls wore paper flowers in their hair, and all the boys wore sunglasses and beach hats. Miss Deaver clapped her hands and said, "This is so colorful." The day after that, Nick turned the classroom thermostat up to about 90 degrees with a little screwdriver he had brought in from home. All the kids changed into shorts and t-shirts and shirts and took off their shoes. When Miss Deaver left the room for a minute, Nick spread out 10 cups of fine white sand all over the classroom floor. Miss Deaver was surprised again at just how creative her students could be. But the sand got tracked out into the hallway where Manny, the custodian, did not think it was creative at all, and he stomped right down to the office. The principal followed the trail of sand, and when she arrived, Miss Deaver was teaching the hula to some kids near the front of the room, and a tall, thin, shirtless boy with chestnut hair was spiking a Nerf volleyball over a net made from 6 t-shirts tied together. The 3rd grade trip to the South Seas ended suddenly. But that didn't stop Nick from trying to liven things up. Lincoln Elementary just needed a good jolt every once in a while, and Nick was just the guy to deliver it. About a year later, Nick made the great blackbird discovery. One night he learned on a TV show that red-winged blackbirds give this high-pitched chirp when a hawk or some other danger comes near. Because of the way the sound travels, the hunter birds can't tell where the high-pitched chirp is coming from. The next day, during silent reading, Nick glanced at his teacher and he noticed that Mrs. Avery's nose was curved, kind of like the beak of a hawk. So Nick let out a high, squeaky blackbird. Mrs. Avery jerked her head up from the book and she looked around. She couldn't tell who did it, so she just said, "Shh," to the whole class. A minute later, Nick did it again, louder. Beep! This time there was a little giggling from the class, but Mrs. Avery pretended not to hear the sound, and about 15 seconds later she slowly stood up and walked to the back of the classroom. Without taking his eyes off his book and without moving at all, Nick put his heart and soul into the highest, most annoying chirp of all. Beep! Mrs. Avery pounced. "Janet Fisk, you stop that right that instant." "But it wasn't me. Honest." There was a catch in Janet's voice as if she might cry. Mrs. Avery knew she had made a mistake and she apologized to Janet. "But someone is asking for trouble," Mrs. Avery said, looking more like a hawk every second. Nick kept reading and he didn't make a peep. At lunchtime, Nick talked to Janet. He felt bad that Mrs. Avery had pounced on her. Janet lived in Nick's neighborhood, and sometimes they played together. She was good at baseball, and she was better at soccer than most of the kids in the whole school, boys or girls. Nick said, "Hey, Janet, I'm sorry you got yelled at during reading. It was my fault. I was the one who made the sound." "You did?" asked Janet. "But how come Mrs. Avery thought it was me?" So Nick told her about the blackbirds, and Janet thought it was pretty interesting. And then she tried making a peep or two, and Janet's chirps were even higher and squeakier than Nick's. She promised to keep everything a secret. For the rest of Nick's fourth grade year, at least once a week, Mrs. Avery heard a loud beep from somewhere in her classroom. Sometimes it was a high-pitched chirp, and sometimes it was a very high-pitched chirp. Mrs. Avery never figured out who was making that sound, and gradually she trained herself to ignore it. But she still looked like a hawk. To Nick, the whole thing was just one long and successful science experiment. And Janet Fisk enjoyed it too. Now, full disclosure, that's the kind of nonsense that would drive me absolutely bananas as a teacher. Repetitive noises are my kryptonite. So I would not love having Nick in my class, but I do admire his spirit and his creativity, and his desire to make things fun. That's part of why I do First Chapter Fridays, is to make things fun in school. So I don't know, y'all. You're gonna have to pick up the book and see what he does next, and this whole business with the pen Frindle. Obviously, you can find it in your school library. This one's super popular, so you should have no trouble finding it there whatsoever, or your public library. It is a little bit older, so you might have to ask an indie bookstore to actually order it for you. Otherwise, I will always put the Amazon link down there in the bottom of the video description box for you. Thanks so much for joining me for this First Chapter Friday video. I hope you enjoyed it and you will come back for more. I'll see you again next time. Happy reading.
This week's mystery quote says, "Like the sunrise, some things just have to happen, and all you can really do is watch." Did you write it down correctly? If you want to continue reading Frindle by Andrew Clements, pick up a copy from your school library, purchase one from your favorite local indie bookstore, or grab it via the link in the description box. Then be sure to check out the rest of the First Chapter Friday playlist. You guys, I am getting really close to 200 books here. So many great ones for you to pick from and listen in. Thanks so much for visiting my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. I hope you come back again for more great First Chapter Friday videos, brain breaks, teaching tips, direct instruction videos, and more. I'll see you again next time. Happy reading!